Welcome back, Dragon Lords, to the Westeros' Wonders. Today, we're diving back into the world of House of the Dragon. Let's begin. The Dance of the Dragons has finally reached a point where there is no going back. After an entire season of political manipulation, shifting alliances, betrayals, and the slow destruction of House Targaryen, Season 3 ends with one of the most brutal episodes of the entire series. Episode 8, titled The Treasons at Tumbleton, gives us the Battle of Tumbleton, the collapse of the Green's position in the Reach, major deaths, the disappearance of Daeron, and perhaps most importantly, the realization that this war is no longer about simply deciding who sits on the Iron Throne. It has become a war where everyone is losing something. And by the end of this episode, it becomes clear that the Dance of the Dragons is turning into exactly what the name promised: a catastrophe created by dragons, ambition, and betrayal. So today, we're going to break down the entire episode, discuss the biggest moments, the character arcs, the deaths, the betrayals, and what this finale could mean for Season 4. Massive spoilers ahead. The episode immediately makes one thing clear: the war has reached a completely different stage. Tumbleton has become one of the most important strategic locations in the conflict, and both sides understand that controlling it could dramatically change the balance of power. The Greens have established themselves in the town, but their position isn't nearly as secure as it appears. On the other side, Daemon's forces are approaching with a massive army, and this is where the episode does something very interesting. Instead of presenting the battle as a simple black versus green conflict, the writers show us that the armies themselves are beginning to fracture. People are fighting for different reasons. Some are fighting for Rhaenyra. Some are fighting for Aemond. Some are fighting for their families. And some are simply fighting because war has become the only thing they know. That is the central theme of this finale. The dance is no longer controlled by the people who started it. Daemon's presence is one of the biggest strengths of the episode. He has spent much of the season dealing with his own psychological and supernatural experiences, but now he finally returns to the battlefield. And when Daemon arrives with the Riverlords and the Northern forces, the situation immediately changes. The army surrounding Tumbleton isn't just a military force. It's a message. The Blacks are no longer defending themselves. They are coming for the Greens. And Daemon understands that victory here could have enormous consequences. But what makes Daemon's character fascinating is that he isn't the same man we saw at the beginning of the series. The reckless prince who once wanted glory has slowly transformed into someone who understands the cost of power. He knows that every victory in this war is going to require another sacrifice, and that becomes especially important when the battle begins. The episode finally gives us what many fans have been waiting for: a massive dragon battle. The Battle of Tumbleton is easily one of the biggest action sequences in the series so far. The scale is enormous. Armies clash on the ground. Dragons fill the sky. Buildings burn. Soldiers are crushed beneath horses and dragons. And the battlefield quickly becomes impossible to control. One of the best things about the sequence is that the dragons don't feel like simple weapons. They are unpredictable creatures. Once they enter the battle, nobody completely controls what happens next. This is exactly what makes dragon warfare so terrifying. A single dragon can completely change the outcome of a battle within seconds. But the same dragon can also destroy its own side. And that is exactly what happens at Tumbleton. One of the standout characters of the episode is Roddy the Ruin. His role might seem relatively small compared with characters like Daemon, Rhaenyra, or Aemond. But the finale proves that a character doesn't need to be a Targaryen to become memorable. Roddy and his men charge into battle with almost suicidal determination. And honestly, this is one of the most old-school Game of Thrones moments in the entire episode. There is no complicated political strategy. No prophecy, no secret bloodline, just soldiers going into battle knowing that they may never come back. Roddy's final moments are brutal, but there's also something strangely heroic about them. He becomes the embodiment of the old warrior culture of Westeros, a man who understands that his role in history may simply be to die fighting, and his death becomes one of the emotional highlights of the battle. On the green side, Aemond Hightower finds himself trapped in a rapidly collapsing situation. The Hightowers have always represented one of the most powerful political forces behind Aegon's claim. But Tumbleton demonstrates how quickly that power can disappear. Aemond's army is surrounded. His options are limited, and the battlefield becomes increasingly chaotic. What makes his death particularly satisfying from a storytelling perspective is that the Hightower forces are finally confronted by the consequences of the war they helped create. The Greens believed that political control could win them the throne. But once dragons and armies enter the equation, politics becomes much harder to control. Aemond's death is therefore more than just another casualty. It represents a collapse of another pillar of the Green cause. But perhaps the most unpredictable character in the entire episode is Ulf the White. Ulf has always been dangerous because nobody can completely trust him. And Episode 8 proves exactly why. His loyalty isn't based on ideology. It is based on survival, power, and opportunity. And when the battle reaches a critical moment, Ulf's actions completely change the situation. The betrayal is one of the biggest turning points of Tumbleton. The Greens thought they could rely on their dragon riders. But once Ulf turns, everything changes. And this is one of the most important messages of the episode. Having a dragon doesn't guarantee loyalty. The Greens have dragons. The Blacks have dragons. But the real weapon is the person controlling them. And if that person cannot be trusted, the dragon becomes a liability. Then we come to one of the biggest mysteries of the finale, Daeron Targaryen. Daeron had become increasingly important throughout the season. Unlike some of the other Targaryens, Daeron has generally been portrayed as more compassionate and grounded, which makes his fate especially tragic. During the chaos at Tumbleton, Daeron disappears, and the episode deliberately refuses to give us a completely straightforward answer. Is he dead? Did he escape? Is he seriously injured? The uncertainty is clearly intentional, and because Daeron is such an important character moving forward, his disappearance could have enormous consequences for Season 4. The show is also taking some liberties with the timeline and presentation of events compared with the source material, so viewers who know fire and blood shouldn't assume that every detail will happen exactly the same way. That uncertainty is actually one of the most exciting things about the finale. While Tumbleton dominates the episode, Rhaenyra's storyline is equally important, because while armies are fighting in the field, Rhaenyra is fighting another kind of war, a political and religious war. She wants legitimacy. She wants recognition. She wants a throne that she believes was stolen from her. But the problem is that ruling Westeros isn't simply about having the strongest claim. It's about convincing people to accept your authority, and Rhaenyra is beginning to realize just how difficult that is. Her frustration becomes increasingly visible. Emma Darcy once again delivers an excellent performance, particularly in the quieter moments. Rhaenyra is not simply angry. She is exhausted. She is grieving. She is afraid, and she knows that every failure costs her more supporters. One of the most interesting elements of the finale is Rhaenyra's struggle with the High Septon. This storyline reminds us that the Iron Throne isn't just a political institution. Religion matters. Public perception matters. Tradition matters. And Rhaenyra's claim challenges many of the established traditions of Westeros. This is why she cannot simply walk into King's Landing and declare herself queen. She needs people to believe that she is a legitimate ruler. And when religious authority refuses to fully support her, Rhaenyra is forced to confront a painful reality. Being the rightful heir and being accepted as a rightful ruler are two completely different things. Another devastating moment in the finale is Rhaenyra. Her storyline has been one of the most tragic throughout the season. Rhaenyra has always felt different from the other members of the royal family. While others chase power, she has seemed more interested in simply surviving the madness surrounding her. But the psychological pressure becomes unbearable. Her fate is heartbreaking because she represents one of the central tragedies of the dance. The people who suffer the most are often the people who never wanted the war. Rhaenyra didn't create this conflict. She didn't start the rivalry between Rhaenyra and Alicent. She didn't decide that the Targaryens should fight for the throne. Yet she becomes one of its greatest victims. Her storyline adds emotional weight to what could otherwise have been just another huge action episode. If there is one word that defines this finale, it is betrayal. Ulf betrays Black Army. Gwaine Hightower betrays his cousin Aemond Hightower. The title, The Treasons at Tumbleton, is therefore extremely appropriate. The episode is showing us that the dance isn't simply a war between two sides. It is a war inside every side. The Blacks are divided. The Greens are divided. And the people who started the war are slowly losing control over it. That's what makes the dance so terrifying. Another important aspect of the finale is the relationship between Rhaenyra and Daemon. Their relationship has changed dramatically throughout the series. At first, Daemon was the unpredictable warrior and Rhaenyra was a young princess desperate for recognition. Now they are both leaders of a war that has destroyed their family. There is a sense that both characters understand something terrible. Even if they win, they may not have anything left. That is a tragedy of the Targaryen civil war. The Iron Throne might be the prize, but the family itself is a casualty. The Battle of Tumbleton is not just another battle. It fundamentally changes the direction of the war. The Greens lose important military strength. The Blacks demonstrate that they can still launch devastating attacks. But neither side gets a clean victory. Instead, the battle creates more instability. And that's exactly what the dance needs at this point in the story. The war is becoming uncontrollable. There are too many dragons, too many armies, too many competing ambitions, and too many people who have reasons to betray each other. One of the biggest differences between early House of the Dragon and this finale is how the dragons are portrayed. Earlier in the series, dragons were symbols of royal power. They were magnificent. They represented the greatness of House Targaryen. But now, they are weapons of mass destruction. When a dragon enters a battlefield, entire groups of soldiers can disappear within seconds. Villages can burn, armies can collapse, and civilians pay the price. The finale finally embraces the horrifying reality of the dance. When you use dragons to fight a civil war, there are no real winners. There are three things I think the finale does particularly well. First, the action. The Battle of Tumbleton is spectacular. The scale, visual effects, dragon combat, and battlefield chaos make this one of the most ambitious episodes of the series. Second, the character performances. Aemond continues to be one of the strongest performers on the show. The actors playing the Targaryens, Hightowers, and supporting characters all sell the emotional consequences of the war. Third, the tone. The episode finally feels like the Game of Thrones universe at its darkest. It is violent. It's unpredictable. Characters can die. Alliances can collapse. And victory never feels completely safe. That feeling of uncertainty is something the franchise has always done extremely well. The dance has reached the stage where revenge is becoming more important than victory. Season 4 should therefore be less about asking, who will win? And more about asking, how much will be left when someone finally wins? Because the Iron Throne may survive, but House Targaryen may not.